Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Linda Keller, and I've got two other staff who work in adult ed in Minnesota joining us to present today. So today's session is going to be about remote testing and how 3 individual programs are making it work within their program. So we do want to find out who's in the room with us. And so we'd like you to share about adult ed. So we want to know what your current role is, the program name that you work with, and how many months or years you've been in adult ed. If you could throw that in the chat for us, please. So we got another 30-year person, Susan. I've been in adult ed for 30 years too, so. All right. Awesome. We've got some seasoned folks here and some new folks too. So, so thank you for sharing. Next question, we got an icebreaker here. How familiar are folks with remote testing? A, never done one. B, have done a few, but still pretty new to it. C, done a couple, know how to, but want to be more familiar. And then D, super familiar and want to bounce ideas off of other people in the group. So we got a lot of A's. Well, good. Welcome. Welcome to the group. Okay. Got a few season 2. Yay. Okay. So thinking about what brought you today's session, the first thing that we're going to do is each of the presenters today are going to introduce themselves and their experience with adult ed and a little bit about their programs. And then we're going to dive into how remote testing is working with each of our agencies. And then we'll hopefully have enough time at the questions or at the end for questions. But then we're going to give you some food for thought at the end too. If you're considering launching remote testing in your program, there's things that you need to consider. So today's agenda and just thinking ahead, again, we're going to do intros. We want to hear about how it's currently working as of today with our programs. And just a general reminder, we don't have all the answers, but like those of us that are already delivering it know how it works in our own individual programs with specific staff. Then we're going to talk about devices that test takers need with both CASAS and with TABE. And then we're going to share tools that we've already created so you don't have to start from scratch. If you want to consider, you can case and steal our information that we're sharing. And then, like I said, hopefully we'll have time at the end for follow-up questions. So I'm going to turn my camera off now and my audio off now, and we're going to let each of us present who we are and a little bit about us. So thanks.
And I believe I'm up first if Linda goes to the next slide for me here. I'll start talking. I'm Jeff Galbavy. I am with Harmony Adult Basic Education. We're located in North St. Paul, or no, technically Maplewood, but we serve the North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale school districts in the surrounding area as part of the Metro East Consortium. I've been in community ed since 2019 and in adult education since 2022. I work as an ABE facilitator, so my main roles are in data entry, enrollment, and assessment. And as part of that assessment piece, I am the primary point person along with a couple of colleagues who provide remote e-testing to our online ESL students. And we were, when the statewide MOS program was through Metro's Career Pathways, providing intake remote testing there. We have recently transitioned that to Mounds View within the Metro East Consortium, as the MOS program has also transitioned there. I will now mute for Melinda.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Melinda, and I am at Moorhead Adult Education. Linda, you want to flip the slide? I have been with this program for 8 years. Previously, I have worked as a para in our district. Currently, my role as admin assistant is data entry, everything to do with SID, intake and enrollment of new students, orientation and setting that up, pre and post testing. I do proctor for GED testing on site. And we partner with several community agencies and partners that have written grants that require TABE testing. And so I am in charge of that for our area. We have 5 consortium sites that are part of us, the Moorhead ABE, and then a local jail program that we serve as well. All right, now Linda.
All right. I'll turn the camera back on. Slide this slide ahead if I can get it to work. Okay. My name is Linda Keller. I've been in adult ed for 30 years in support staff roles since I've been here. Done intake and assessment. My current role is, my current title is accountability coordinator, but it's all things to do with SID, data testing, student orientation, data collection, data reporting. I also have GED manager access for the consortia, but our website is up here. I've always been in intake and testing and support role. I'm not a licensed teacher, but I've been working on the assessment grant with Marty Olson since 2008, delivering CASAS and TABE training too. And I'm a point of contact for 75 staff here at Metro North for all things related to SID, reporting, data collection, and provide work direction to all the data entry team that we have here. And I think that's all that I have in my slide. We do have 8 different school districts that we're part of, some very large, some very small. We have metro sites and we have some sites in a couple corrections locations, as well as Anoka Ramsey Community College, Anoka Tech with Deb Ed Math, and so forth. So we have a wide variety of sites and programming at all the different sites that we serve at Metro North. So. All right, Jeff, you are up.
All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what remote testing looks like for us at Metro East. The test series that we use are CASAS steps, CASAS goals for students who have already taken it, but then I would say exclusively CASAS goals 2 for new intakes at this point. For intake, we do use paper-based testing with very limited exceptions. For post-testing, we do mix in the remote testing for our online ESL students. Approximately 80% of our students who hit that 12-hour threshold are ESL students. The other 20% are GED or ABE students. So we are primarily an ESL program, and we use, as we go to the next slide, licensed Zoom accounts when we're connecting for remote testing. So with that in mind, we use a remote control setup, and for the remote control setup, we use the safe exam browsers. If you want to use the remote control setup, you'll want to make sure you're using those. Christy, in terms of why paper for intake, it's a great way for us to make an initial connection with students. To have some of those conversations face to face, and then to verify that we're getting correct contact information with regards to like emails, phone numbers. Um, so it and it kind of comes from my boss Scott. He wants people to come in, and but I think that's some of the background to that. In terms of setting up the remote tests, I also work directly with the online teachers. So they're doing a lot of the pre-screening for me, which is nice, but I've worked with them to get to that point in terms of making sure that students have a compatible device and working on getting some times. I do have linked some template emails that I use either with teachers or mostly with students to help schedule a time, to help make sure that they're going to have an appropriate space for remote testing, and then just to confirm what communication they'll get from me on the day of. And I do have a set schedule of hours that I'm communicating to help facilitate uh, scheduling these remote tests at a time that I can offer to avoid needing too much back and forth and avoid rescheduling as much as possible. I will now hand it over to Melinda to talk about remote testing at Moorhead.
Whoops.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jeff.
So my perspective is coming from we only use remote testing with the TABE series. We are in the process of getting CASAS online, but the information that I have to share with you today is just based on TABE, and we are almost fully switched over to the 13-14 online. We do still do a little bit of 11-12 if we need to post test people. And we do have CASAS steps for our ESL students. We are very evenly split with our students that are enrolled, about half ABE and half ESL, and that stays pretty steady throughout the year. So that is, you can flip to the next slide too, Linda. Our remote testing, we use during enrollment only on like very special occasions. We work with our local jail system as well as our juvenile detention, and the remote testing has been used a lot with our juvenile detention students, trying to onboard them and just get a feel for if they're ready to pursue the GED or if it's better for them to stay like in a K-12 system. Our outlying consortium sites, we are in the process of trying to onboard some of those students doing the remote testing. And for post-testing, we have a fair amount of students that do online-only classes. They either have transportation issues or childcare issues, and it is very hard to get them to come in for testing. And so those are some of the times that we use remote testing. We don't do like Linda and Jeff with big groups of students. It's very individual. It's very one person at a time, sometimes two. And so I guess part of my sharing is just to let you know that even if you have a smaller site or smaller amounts of people, it still can be successful for you to do remote testing with one or two students. I'm only part-time, and my teachers do not do the online testing right now and remote testing, and so it's kind of worked in for whatever is convenient for the student and me. So I will turn it over to Linda.
And I'm having some low bandwidth problems, so I'm not sure what's going on. I'm going to leave my video off. I know that this next slide, there were slides of some templates that Melinda had created for the tools for Moorhead that she was willing to share. So there's links in today's presentation for all of those tools. All right, so with Metro North. I wanted to share like the NRS testing that we're using at Metro North right now. We're using 11-12s yet for our reading, math, and some language. We are using the 13-14 testing with the language test at one of our locations that has higher level English language learning students. We use CASAS steps, reading and listening. We're using the Best Plus oral exam, and then we're also using CASAS goals, but we have launched CASAS goals to reading with with most of our locations as folks are coming in through new student intake, and then monitoring the goals reading test for folks who haven't made a level gain. And then we use the goals 2 math also. Since I've been with Metro North, I was here in the mid 90s, but when I first began here, our numbers were about 60% to 70% ABE students versus ESL students, and that number has shifted considerably over the last 8 to 10 years, that we are primarily seeing more English language learners at all of our locations. When does Metro North do remote testing? We have done remote testing during enrollment with one-on-one with learners, and we've kind of done it with special accommodations, like only because we don't have a lot of staffing that are super comfortable delivering it yet. Situations where someone had a trained service dog that we did some remote testing with her. Although we did want to see the dog come in to the location, we understood why they couldn't come into the site. And then there was some folks who had some transportation issues and they were not able to come in during enrollment testing. But everyone else, we encourage them to come on site to have testing delivered in an online platform, computer-based, either CASAS or TABE. Remote testing is used during all site testing at a few Metro North sites, and we're using it during class time where the instructors who have gotten training will be proctoring that testing. So the classes and the sites who are currently delivering remote testing include Anoka Ramsey Community College with a DebEd Math, as well as our Anoka Technical College, which does GED prep and then TEAS test prep also. But our Blaine location that has 9 class levels, we are doing remote testing with Best Plus if students are above an NRS level 2. With their speaking, we are doing remote testing with CASAS steps reading when students are at an ESL NRS level 4 or higher. We deliver it with all of our ABE levels who are using TABE 11-12 or CASAS goals or goals 2 reading. And then all of the GED prep courses are offering remote testing because they have trained proctors with our RLA class, with our social studies and science class, and then with our math class as well. So what subjects are delivered? We're doing reading and language with 11-12, and then anybody who's above an ABE level 2 at Blaine. We're doing math, either 11-12 or 13-14 with math instruction only at Blaine. We're doing 13-14 if folks are at an ABE 2 or higher. They're exploring it at Brooklyn Center and Columbia Heights sites. And then at Blaine, we're doing and using CASAS steps reading and or listening with folks who are above an NRS ESL level 4. And CASAS goals and goals 2 reading, CASAS goals 2 math, and then Best Plus 3.0 is delivered remotely at both the Blaine and the Columbia Heights sites. So the tools, I've created some tools because there's a template that we have folks that say that they're interested in remote testing, but whether or not they have a device that can support remote testing is another story. So I called it an interest in remote testing letter for TABE. And then that being said, there's a DRC device readiness check that needs to be run on any potential testing device that could be used. That would include whether or not their device operating system supports remote testing, whether or not they have the bandwidth in their home or wherever they're hoping to take the test at. And then once they confirm that with a test proctor, then they would get the invite letter to the all site instructions of what their next steps are and what they need to do to join a remote testing session with their teacher, who would be their proctor. So there's 3 different documents in there for TABE remote testing. And then with CASAS, we have, I developed a remote test student letter that has instructions as well as screenshots embedded into it. So they know the step-by-step screens that they are going to see. And there's also a link in there to the test proctor instructions also along with screenshots. Just something to remember with students. I mean, we hope that there's good visuals, but Metro North has found that remote testing is easier since last October. And CASAS launched the eTest 2 server for doing remote testing, because prior to October of last year, remote testing, there was a couple different methods that you could do remote testing, but most of them needed to be done one-on-one with a single proctor and a single student. So because our test proctors that are teachers do not do remote testing frequently, I have developed some troubleshooting documents for them, because there's always a little bit of a, oh my gosh, this happened, what do I do? So I have a draft that I pulled together in October for TABE remote testing tips. And then we've got some troubleshooting tips for CASAS remote testing. And again, these are drafts. I'm going to continuously be adding different troubleshooting tips for, oh my gosh, what if this happens? You need to do this. So please feel free to take a look at things that have come up so far. Metro North has been remote testing with TABE for probably 3.5 years. And I know I've trained other folks in the state just of how it's worked for us, and then offered ideas for them. But remote testing with CASAS we're a year into it, and that seems to be a little bit easier and less steps for students that we've found at Metro North. So I believe Jeff is up again.
Indeed, I am. I'm now going to go through a little bit of some things to be thinking about before truly getting started with remote testing. So this is mostly for the people who chose answer A, but it can apply to anyone. We'll start with, what personnel do you already have and what personnel do you need? Meaning in terms of like who, whether it's yourself and or someone else working at your site, who is going to be working on remote testing? And for those people working with remote testing, do you have someone that's comfortable with technology and comfortable with troubleshooting technology? And then even to take it a step further, are they comfortable with thinking and troubleshooting on the fly? I say this because there's, the initial setup, making sure you have the technology you want. Then there's the day of setup, making sure you're ready for your student when they're joining the remote testing session. But then there's once the student has joined, sometimes things won't go as expected. And having that ability to work with the student to troubleshoot, work on your end to troubleshoot, but in the moment, and just things to consider. It could be you, it could be someone else you work with, it could be you and someone else you work with. I have a second part to the before getting started. And for this part, there's a question of, what software do you have? What software do you not have? And is there software that you still need? You might need to install a specific exam browser to be able to deliver tests remotely. Are there specific hardware needs? Maybe the devices you have available or the devices that your students are going to try to test from are too old. Um, so maybe that's something where if it's on the school's end, can you get your program to invest in a couple devices that can support things? Not saying you'd for sure be able to do that, but that'd be something to look at and consider and have in mind. If your students' devices are too old such that they can't support remote testing, um, being able to identify that up front, that can change the conversation. It can give the student time and encouragement if they have the means to get a newer device to do so, or it can have them shift their mentality to, maybe I should come in and test in person if I don't have the correct technology. And then a big thing to think about with all of this is as you're planning for future testing and future remote testing, think about what will be sustainable. Meaning, try to think not just what's going to work for the first 3 remote tests you ever give, but try to think what's going to work for you 6 months from now, a year from now, 2, 3, 5 years from now. We can get more specific with what should be considered within local programs. One of those, which was touched on earlier, is will your program offer remote testing as an option for new learners and enrollment testing, or will your program just keep it for post testing? If you are going to use remote testing as an option for new learners, uh, think about what criteria and what screening tools you'll have in place to try to make that process work more often than not. Um, and then if you are just going to offer remote testing during post testing, uh, determine which students you're comfortable offering remote testing to. There is a difference between remote testing an ESL 1 or 2 student, which I have done, and remote testing an ESL 5 or 6 student, or even with the statewide MOS program, when I remote tested those students, a lot of EB 5 and EB 6 students. I mean, make sure in that process, once again, you're determining that a student has a device that will work, has some tech skills. And then, like Linda had mentioned at Metro North, their recommendation is to wait until ESL level 4 plus to offer remote testing. I will say, depending on your ability to keep more of the remote testing on your end as staff versus if it's a little more student dependent, to me, that is a big consideration as well. Because if I can keep more of the remote testing on my end as staff, I've found it easier to slide down to an ESL 3 student or maybe an ESL 2 student. And then also think which series and subjects will be delivered during post testing. Will it be CASAS? Will it be TABE? Will it be reading? Will it be math? Will there be listening? May is asking, how many students do I usually remote test at a time? A lot of the time I end up with only 1 or 2. The most I have ever done at once was 7. I think beyond 4, I would really think about how comfortable I am with how many students I have going at once. And part of it too is if the students are taking a similar level of test, it's a lot easier to run multiple students off of one session versus if they're all taking slightly different tests from each other. So we continue to look at basic local considerations. We're also going to want to think about which staff are going to facilitate and coordinate remote e-testing appointments at your agency. I don't proctor every remote testing session at my agency because sometimes students want to test in the evening. There's other evening staff when I'm not around. With that in mind, I do ask that all the requests come through me. I've kind of, with the agreement of my colleagues, agreed that I'll be the one that takes the request, and then I can coordinate with the staff that will be on site. Hey, the student's asking to test at 5:30 on Tuesday. Is it okay if I say yes and you're going to proctor it? Make sure it's good with their schedule. Uh, that can look slightly different for each program though. And then with that process, make sure that you're thinking about when each day or each week you're going to offer the remote testing and how will those remote tests fit into the rest of your workday and work week flow. Um, if you're able to kind of just be dedicated to that test and you don't have much on the schedule, great. If you've got to carve out a section of time that's going to take away from something else, still consider doing it, but think about, is that going to be okay for the rest of the work environment? Uh, Also, having a program policy for late and missed test appointments. Uh, it can get very frustrating if you schedule with someone 4 or 5 times and they never show up, or they show up like 2 hours late. You're not necessarily just going to sit in an online Zoom or Google Meet call for 2 hours waiting for a student to show up. So saying, okay, you've got 15 minutes. Like for our program, if a student's 5 minutes late, I give them a phone call. Uh, if I haven't heard from them within 15 minutes, at 15 minutes, I reschedule. When I started, it was at 30 minutes. We weren't as busy with the rest of our workday at 30 minutes versus 15 minutes, so that's why I had to dial back how late a student could be. And then we kind of do a 3-strike policy for missed tests. And then again, just making sure that staff have those remote test troubleshooting trainings and tools, which Linda's done a great job developing some of those for Metro North. It looks like Metro North also has 15 to 20 minutes for their late policy. We move to the next slide here. We're going to look at how are the potential test takers being contacted? Meaning, like, how are the local staff connecting with the learner prior to the test session? Personally, I mainly connect via email, sometimes via phone call. I like to put the emphasis on the email because I send out my remote testing link via email, and I want to make sure the students are able to communicate with me throughout that process. Then there's also scheduling apps that might be available for free, something like Remind. Maybe you could create like a shared generic email for your district or your program. And then like I have a series of template emails so that I can queue them up and send them at generally pretty prescribed times leading up to the remote testing process.
Hey, Jeff, we're about 10 minutes from the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. As we look, in terms of what requirements are out there for a remote test taker, test takers need a quiet, uninterrupted space in their home, meaning no one in their home can help them take the test. They also need stable internet, and more on the Metro North side, they've been able to dive in and notice that hotspots tend to only allow one device to be connected. So with that in mind, recommending that no one else at home is using Wi-Fi or bandwidth during testing is advised. The test takers need a tech compatible testing device. whether they're going to have the exam browser on their device, such that they need a device that can have that exam browser installed, or if they're going to connect remotely via Zoom, then they would need a device that can accept remote control and can successfully use remote control. You'll want to make sure they have a device that's going to work. And if the answer to any of those questions is no, it is recommended that you do on-site testing with the student for the testing appointment, whether it is a paper-based test or an e-test. We can look at some of the potential remote testing devices for CASAS. Currently, computers, Chromebooks, and tablets are supported for remote testing, and phones are currently in the beta testing phase. I know Christy said she was part of the beta testing. I kind of stumbled upon the app in the App Store, and it seems like they were smoothing a couple things out, but there was an accessible test that when it's ready should work for remote testing on phones. For TABE, individuals can use either a desktop or laptop computer or a Chromebook. They would need to use Google Chrome as the browser. And I believe Linda links some remote proctoring system requirements as well for TABE. And we did leave some time for questions. I know we just threw a lot of information at you, but some of it's kind of a generic overview, and we would like to take the time, if anyone's got any specific questions that haven't been answered yet, to try to field and answer those at this time.
Jeff, this is Rachel. How many, or I guess I can ask a question of all three of you guys. Like, how often do people not show up or cancel? I mean, it's just, name of the
Yeah.
game. People don't always show up for appointments in person either.
Yeah, I know when I started remote testing, I was told, hey, it's only going to be a 50-50 if a person shows up. I will say, having taken the time to connect with the teachers to do the pre-screening, using some of these template emails, and the one thing I've said is consistently, I will send you your remote testing link 30 minutes before the test.
Mm-hmm.
I would estimate my no-show rate is down to maybe 20%,
Mm-hmm.
which, 4 out of 5 people showing up is pretty good, especially compared to where I was starting out at.
Yep. And when you're doing the tests, Melinda, Linda, and Jeff, are you watching the person on the other side of the screen like you would proctor an in-person test?
Yes, they need to
Yep.
be on camera. Yep. They can have their mute on if they've got children or people in the background. Ideally, they're going to be in a room by themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, they do need to leave their video on while they're testing.
I remember when I was testing somebody, I saw her pick up her phone and start, like calling someone. And I was like, hey, you can't do that. Even though you go through all these things beforehand, but
Yep, yep, yep.
Yep. And for my scheduling, we use the Gmail, and there's a feature where you can send your email. So if I book the appointment a week out, I schedule it that very minute, the email to send 30 minutes before the day of testing.
That's smart. Very smart. I know with working with the state of Illinois and their remote testing hub, Marty and I have learned some different platforms that they use for their remote testing, including Calendly and Monday.com. I believe Calendly is when they pick the testing date from the calendar based on proctor's availability. And then the monday.com site is where they set up all the reminders. So folks get a lot of reminders up to, I believe, a half an hour before their testing session begins. And that's what's going to be the case with what's going to get used with remote testing that's going to be done through that pilot here in Minnesota.
That's nice. And another thing too, sometimes I'll send that 30-minute email and the student will reply back, "Hi, I'm feeling sick. Can I reschedule?"
Okay.
But the fact they're still emailing you about 25 minutes in advance, haven't done too much of the setup yet, so the sting of a no-show doesn't feel nearly as bad when you know ahead of time and can pivot to something else.
And I just saw Laura Malat's comment. Laura, a recommendation that we've had at Metro North is schedule a consistent time with your program that you will deliver remote testing, and like you could do it in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening. I mean, sometimes there's weekend options, but I mean, it's not the same availability as with GED remote proctoring where they can do it 24/7 and they have proctors on staff 24/7. Yeah, we need sleep, we need lives too. So yeah.
Yeah. And another thing I like to think about is, remote testing is helping our programs with their post-test rates and measurable skill gains, but we're also helping the students by not requiring them to make a trip in to post-test. So it's good to keep in mind that it's good and important for us to help our program, but also it is kind of a nice extra service that we can offer our students.
Absolutely agree. It is.
I suppose we can continue to field questions the last couple minutes. If anyone has questions they need more time to think about or aren't necessarily comfortable sharing in the chat today, we do have our contact information on the last 3 slides. Feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions you may have.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we're okay with answering questions after the fact too, because it might take you some time to think about it. And the biggest thing is, and I tell folks this, I should have added this to the slide deck, is create some fake student records in each of your CASAS and your TABE test accounts so you can practice with coworkers. I have John Denver, and I have a Captain Kangaroo, and I have Miranda Lambert, I have Stevie Ray Vaughan, I have lots of just fake student records that you can practice with your coworkers with, so that you get comfortable, because you don't want to practice on a student your first time. You just want to know what you're doing and be confident with what you're doing. Wilbur, Jane is yours. Okay, good to know, Christy.
I've got a Joe Mauer.
Okay.
I've got a default version of me that I can just throw tests onto.
Okay, guys, we're at time. So thank you everyone for attending this session. Thank you, Melinda, Linda, and Jeff. Your experience is really useful. Thank you so much for sharing. So, and like Linda mentioned, the PDF of the slides will be in the slide deck, and I will drop in the link for, once I get to it, for the agenda in case people don't have it accessible. So I'll do that right now.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. And
yeah,
I'm going to stop recording. There we go. Sure you want to stop recording to